Great. So I am very excited to welcome folks today to Hope for Creation's monthly Green Team event for August 2020. My name is Joan Hawkshurst. I am the coordinator of Hope for Creation and have the honor of working with this organization to support congregational green teams. Today we're going to be talking about sharing the story, religious education and environmental stewardship. I wanted to give you just a quick view of Hope for Creation's mission. We are an interfaith, multi-faith coalition, grassroots of organizations and congregations and individuals who encourage and support work that advances environmental sustainability and climate action in Kalamazoo and Southwest Michigan. We are the regional affiliate of Michigan Interfaith Power and Light, which is a statewide organization. And as I mentioned, one of the things that we do with Hope for Creation is support congregational green teams. Every month we record a topical conversation about something to do with an effort on the part of congregations to become more sustainable, to care for creation, and to be environmental stewards. So here are just some of the examples of past topics we've covered. And you can find any of these on Hope for Creation's YouTube channel, which you can find by searching YouTube for Hope for Creation. We have a great lineup of panelists today. We're very excited by the breadth of wisdom and experience that we've brought together for this presentation. I'm going to let you take a look just for a minute at the names and affiliations of the folks who will be joining us today. And then I'm going to take my screen down so that we can see each other's faces. And while I prepare to do that, I will just say we're going to be together for about an hour. And each of our panelists has been invited to prepare 7 or 8 minutes of remarks. So again, if you wouldn't mind muting unless you are the speaker, I think what we'll do is go in whichever order our folks feel called to speak in. So just so you all know, panelists, you're welcome to follow whomever, to just jump in when it feels appropriate to you. And then we'll ask our guests, our audience, to hold your questions until each panelist has had a chance to kind of share their story, and then we'll open it up for questions. So with that, I'll take the screen down, and I will hope that all of you now can see one another. And I will, maybe I'll invite, I don't know, whomever feels as if they would love to share the story of their congregational work on religious education first. I'm guessing it might be Eileen, it might be Randall, but I'm going to let you all take it from here. So welcome, everyone.
I'll go ahead and start. I was really happy to organize this group of panelists because I am a certified church educator in the Presbyterian Church, which is a designation that we have in our church. And actually just did that a few years ago, and then I retired, which is not really the way you're supposed to do it, but that's how I did it anyway. But I'm also a member of Westminster Presbyterian Church in Portage, and was on the staff there for about 9 years. Retired about 2 years ago.
Thanks, Eileen. I love that you did a brief introduction, and I invite everybody else to do that same, just maybe a minute of who you are and a little bit of your history and what you are doing today for which we've invited you to speak. And then we'll go back and give everybody a chance to talk longer.
All right, I am Augusta Lipsey from Allen Chapel AME Church here in Kalamazoo, on the north side of Kalamazoo. I've been a member there my entire life. I am not a pastor, anything like that. I am a steward, although, which basically I think a lot more churches think of that as a trustee or something. I know Baptist people think of it as trustee, but our job, we deal with the spiritual end of the church and making certain that things are run the way they're supposed to. So I am a retired public school teacher, and I love working with kids. So I do a lot of the Sunday school activities and whatnot in our church. And I will be just hopefully can give some input into what we've been doing at our church, although it's not as elaborate as some. And it's I'm new to Hope for Creation, so I'll just continue learning as I go along. Okay, thank you.
My name is Randall Westfall. No, it's all right. My name is Randall Westfall. I am the director of outdoor ministry at Camp Brethren Heights, which is about 20 minutes east of Big Rapids, Michigan. So right up the road, 131 from most folks in Kalamazoo. I've been in that position for 10 years now. I'm a licensed minister in the Church of the Brethren, which is an Anabaptist radical pietist tradition that pretty much is, we say, cousins to kind of the Mennonites and the Amish. And I have a lot of training. I did about 12, 13 years ago. I did some intense wilderness training. I call it Deep Creation Connection. With a school, one in New Jersey and another one out in Washington State, where I was certified with certifications in naturalist studies, wildlife tracking, bird language, ethnobotany, nature mentoring, and wilderness survival. So I'm deeply passionate about connecting people of all ages, children and youth, but also adults, connecting them and then taking them on an awareness journey that goes from just connection with God's creation to actual communion with God's creation. And that's where those skill sets of wilderness survival and tracking and ethnobotany, all of that kind of intersect as camp director here at Brethren Heights, and affords me that opportunity to, I think, strengthen those cords of connection. And again, just tying that to our faith and practice as disciples of Jesus makes that something even more so, I think, real for people who are looking for that in a Christian faith context.
Meredith, do you want to jump in? No pressure.
Yeah. I'm Meredith Allspach, and I am the director of youth and families at the First Presbyterian Church of Kalamazoo, and I'm the director of faith formation at First Presbyterian Church of Richland. And so I work with the Cradle to Grave in Richland, and I do children and youth only at the Kalamazoo Church and all of their education programming. So I am looking to add more creation care into the teaching and learning. And so I'm here to gain a little bit of insight and learn a little bit more, put more tools in the toolbox for this fall.
Great. Well, thank you all for being here. We may have a couple of additional speakers join us during the course of the conversation. So if I seem like I'm interrupting to bring in another voice, it's because we've had another of our invited guests join us. But for now, we've got a great lineup of folks already here. And I think what I would invite you to do is maybe go in the same order that in which you introduced yourselves, and just take 5 or 6 minutes to share some highlights of the work that you do with environmental sustainability and religious education, some examples, some aspirations, whatever you have prepared or want to share today, and that would have us starting again with Eileen. So take it away, Eileen, and then we'll go Augusta, Randall, Meredith, if that sounds okay.
Okay, thank you. Westminster Presbyterian Church is deeply ingrained in environmental issues and learning about environmental things. We are an earth care congregation, which is a certification through our denomination, which means we are just paying attention to earth care things and working on always being better in both things that we do in our with our building and our grounds, and then also in worship and learning and in many different areas. We also have core values that we've identified, and earth care is one of our 5 core values. So it really is part of pretty much everything that we do. Since I'm retired, I can't really talk about what I'm doing now, but I will mention a few things that we've done over the past few years. I've been more involved in adult education than with our children and youth, and every couple of years we have a 4 to 6 week course on something to do with the environment. The project that I did when I was getting certified a couple of years ago was to write a curriculum on the connection between the environment and a garden, and comparing that the things that a garden needs to grow are the same things that we need to grow. And so we did a 6-week curriculum on that. Just this past spring, we did a book study on the book, The Future You Choose, which is a wonderful book, and it really makes a great study. So we did a book study on that with our adults, and it's always very successful. We usually have 15 to 20 people, and was quite good. Earth care concerns are often brought up in worship. Our buildings and grounds people are very much aware of being environmentally friendly. We're just in the process of putting in new lights in our sanctuary that will be so much better than what we've had before, which were really pretty sad. But these will be LED and just really up to date and pretty environmental. That was a big project. We do some things with our children and youth. We had a concert earlier this summer that was part of our Westminster Art Festival, which is a juried art festival that we invite local artists to participate in. And the theme for that is always something to do with the environment. It changes from year to year, but it's always an environmental theme. Well, we had this outdoor concert and invited families to come, and during the intermission had different activities for the children that came. Some arts and crafts and making some things. But one of the activities we did was to plant potatoes in our church garden, and the kids just loved it. They were so excited, and I've tried to keep them up to date on how the potatoes are going, and when they're ready, we're ready to harvest them in a week or so. We'll have the kids come back again and dig the potatoes, and they'll get to harvest them too, which is a lot of fun. So we're trying to do some real hands-on sorts of things with our children, which is has gone over really quite well, and the kids are very excited about it. And I wrote some notes, and I think that's all I had that I wrote down. But it's an ongoing process of always thinking of the next thing that we can do to connect with the church and with our community that has an environmental theme. So, work in progress. So thank you.
Okay, at Allen Chapel, a lot of what we've done has dealt with recycling. We've been trying to stay as earth friendly and recycle as much as possible. Usually it comes from me getting on people about it. When we go, we have once a month, at least before COVID, once a month we were having a fellowship after church, and different classes would take care. Well, I was always there making certain that things got recycled. We have a big bin in the kitchen for any recycled items, papers and the plastic and the aluminum. So, but because we're a church and we don't pay taxes on the land we're on, we don't get the recycle bins like we do in our homes. So what happens is I just throw it all in my car and bring it home and recycle it. The one thing though, since we've been doing this for quite some time now, and a few years ago, our bishop did have wanted all churches to recycle. I'm not sure how that was evaluated and how well it has actually happened, but at least we were getting some support from the hierarchy. We are still doing as much recycling as possible. Right now, we are every first Tuesday of the month, we have a South Michigan Food Bank. We distribute food with them through our parking lot, and we keep all the cardboard, whatnot. We've kept that and we recycle it. Right now, we actually kept it because we're starting our garden tomorrow. So we have cardboard already available right from yesterday's food distribution. The one thing that has been nice, I have heard from many of the people in our congregation who think about, because of my intense insistence on recycling, they think of me every time they get ready to throw something out at home, and they'll recycle it instead. So I'm glad I made an impression on somebody. With the children, I'm hoping that in the spring, when we get our garden going well and really get a lot of things happening, we want them to be able to plant outside and see. I mean, we can, my brain is telling me to start with seedlings inside in March, and then they'll be able to see it growing and then be able to go and plant theirs out in our garden. So hopefully things will go well with that. That is happening tomorrow, and we're praying that the rain holds off so that we can get everything going and get everything planted that we want to do for tomorrow. So just the recycling and our garden will be how we hopefully will help the community understand a little more about about the sustainability that we want to improve on in our city. Okay, thank you very much.
So I want to share with you a story. I want to tell you a story. First of all, I mean, deep creation connection, which is part of what, I mean, it's woven into the fabric of the camp culture. For a lot of church camps, it tends to be the place where a lot of children and youth and even staff are really exposed to that kind of immersion experience, right? The immersion piece of I say actually what the church is supposed to be, right? It's not, camp doesn't happen typically, a usual day of camp doesn't just happen one day and you go home. Yes, day camps do that, but most residential camps, you're there for a week, right? And you've got to practice active peacemaking, right? You don't get to pick your pew and sit from the opposite person, right? Who you don't necessarily like or agree with. They might be your bunkmate. You're going to have to practice some reconciliation, mediation. We have a chance to be the church at camp. That's how I always kind of frame this, right? And this is oftentimes the first time that kids are really exposed to this sense of what does it mean to have an awareness of eco-discipleship, as we call it. A theology of living, a chance to really think about our kinship with God's creation, right? So I want to tell this really quick story about what this, of what connection, this deep nature connection journey looks like, and how that also translates to it having lasting effects on a faith formation, all that. So Benton was this camper that showed up, and at registration I saw on his forms that he had ADHD, all of these kind of classic, symptoms that kids who can't sit still, he gets distracted easily, right? He admitted he was a gamer. He was probably, I think, 12 or 13, if I remember correctly. This was some time ago, 12 or 13. And he admitted at check-in, he gets easily distracted. And when he couldn't focus on the task at hand, he'd quote these jingles and memes that he'd encountered from like all kinds of various media sources, right? So at the start of our, what we call survivor camp, one of our wilderness camps, he'd go all day long. He would just quote this barrage of taglines from auto insurance companies, clips from comedians, the latest phrase from some new video game, and just other stuff that he picked up along the way, right? And he wanted you to be impressed by this. And he sought attention from other campers and staff, although usually their response was more, they were far from impressed, but actually more annoyed. But that was before he began working on getting a fire using this ancient technology called a bow drill. Some of you have seen this before, where you spin a spindle on a piece of wood and it creates friction, and that generates a coal, and that is one way you can start a fire primitively without matches. That was also before he began reading the stories of wildlife, where he was learning to track and kind of pick up the stories that were happening by the tracks that were in the ground. He wasn't just walking by stories and not seeing them. All of a sudden, he was seeing stories and he was picking up on them. There was the story that he had been missing out on. All of a sudden, he was hyper-focused on these tracks and sign, right? That was before he began breathing in what we know to be true now about the healthy compounds that the cedars and birches, specifically up here at our camp, but lots of other trees, emit these healthy compounds. When you breathe them in, it actually helps to calm you and to lower your blood pressure, all that kind of stuff, right? And this was also before he would walk barefoot and visit what we call a green couch, which is like a sit spot, one place on the landscape to sit and be present just by yourself every day for a short time, to listen for for the ruah, the breath, the wind, the spirit of God. And here's the thing, right? Like, as our week drew to a close, those jingles, those commercials, the jingles and the memes and all that subsided. And in their place were all of a sudden these camp songs, bird call imitations. He was picking up on mourning dove calls, and he was imitating them. He was imitating other birds. He started quoting scripture verses that was part of our curriculum for that week. So what emerged was this much quieter, more focused 12-year-old boy. And he said something at the closing circle that I will always remember. He said, so much of my life is filled with distractions and clutter, and it makes it hard to connect with just about anything. He said, my friends, my family, nature, and especially even God. But he said, for the first time, he goes, in my memory, for the first time this week, I feel as though I was attuned with the rhythm of creation and with God. He said something like, I could really sense that the Holy Spirit was calling me to live a more authentic life of faith. He said, my relationship with God and God's creation feels more real now than it ever has before. And he said, if I ever sense that my relationship with God needs to be restored, I know exactly where I need to go to find that healing, right? You can't tell me that a kid like that walks away from camp as just an experience with a kind of even if you want to call it a mountaintop experience, a chance to just encounter creation in a way that really is life-changing. That's something he's going to carry with him, I hope, for the rest of his life. That's something that that's going to be embedded in him as a seed, that when he talks about care for creation, it's not going to be just some kind of broad picture blanket, right? Concept. He's going to have a care for creation because he's connected with creation. And in his words, he's attuned himself to God's creation. So to me, that speaks of putting us in a place where we begin to shape people in a way that they don't have to think about care for creation as something that just happens. It's embedded into the fabric of their entire life. So, and that's part of, at least in our tradition, in the Church of the Brethren, we talk about a theology of living, and that's core to who we are as disciples. It's how we live. It's how we embed the gospel, the message of for all creation, shalom for all creation. So, yeah, that's just a snippet. I have many, many more stories, but I'd be happy to share more as time allows. But I'm happy to be with all of you today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Randall and Augusta and Eileen. I am going to jump in just for a minute before I turn it back over to Meredith if she chooses, because I want to welcome another guest who has joined us, who I hope will be willing to introduce herself. And Nora, Chow, if you would be willing to just say hi and the organization that you're representing, and just maybe a sentence or two about your work with children and creation care, and then we'll give you a couple minutes to catch up, and then we'll get you into the cycle of spending a little bit more time going into depth. But we wanted to make sure that you were welcomed into the group. So do you want to introduce yourself, Nora?
Nora's muted.
So sorry. Thank you so much for inviting me, Joan and Eileen. I'm really happy to be here, and I've already learned some things from those of you who have spoken before. I represent several organizations, and I'm not exactly sure which one I'm here invited from, but I am a member of both Temple B'nai Israel and the Congregation of Moses. And I am the director of the Kalamazoo Community Jewish School, which is supported by both of those organizations. And so I'm going to speak with my school hat on today. But I am in the process of making plans for this school year that will include made a commitment to Temple B'nai Israel that we will include green education and green activities and coordinate them, hopefully with both congregations.
Great. Well, welcome, Nora. Super glad that you're here to join us. I'm going to give you, like I said, a couple minutes to get into the cycle of speaking. But what we've done is invited each panelist, each guest, to spend maybe 5 or 6 minutes talking about some of the examples of work that they are doing, connecting creation care and earth stewardship to their religious education programs. And then after everyone's had a chance to speak, which I think still includes Meredith and Nora, we will, I might have a question or two, and then we'll have ample time for audience members to ask questions too. So Meredith, if you're interested and willing, now would be a great time for you to jump in and tell us a little bit more about your work.
Okay, I've always incorporated hands-on learning about the earth in some capacity. Both the churches that I serve are earth care congregations. This year, starting in the spring and into summer, we did an illustrated earth curriculum with both churches that really allowed us to do an at-home parent-led lessons and things like that. And then we followed up once a month at each church with a family day. And that is an outdoor event where we then sort of did something that corresponded to the lessons we were doing, whether it was planting flowers or food. We did a lot of nature walks, and where the little children were asked to find something beautiful that God made, or something, that surprised them, and to see them like walk through a little nature walk and look at things with different eyes than normally they would if they were just kind of scampering about has been interesting. There's the Pine Island Garden that the Kalamazoo Church has been nurturing and growing, and that food then gets all donated, thousands and thousands of pounds that go to Ministry with Community. And we've had the children out there for events. We do worship out there where they can wander through, they can be a part of that process, see what's happening, and really connect the dots about how that is us caring for one another as well. We do, I'm trying to think of other things that we've done. There's lots of labyrinth work that is nice, just connecting with nature and taking our shoes off and wandering through labyrinths, and lots of digging in the dirt. And sometimes it's planting flowers, and sometimes it's planting things that we then take to people in nursing homes or something where it can grow under someone else's watchful eye. But just trying to find more ways, especially for the younger children. I do a mission trip every summer with the youth, and we go to a place in West Virginia that has no recycling program. And so our kids have been trying to introduce recycling to the people there, and also gather our trash and haul it home with us. We take it all back so that we can recycle it and not just put it in a landfill out there. So we're trying to do little things, but I certainly would like to incorporate more day to day and week to week with these kids.
Thank you. So Nora, you've gotten a chance to hear a couple of folks sort of dive a little deeper, and now would be a great time if you want to share a little more in depth some of the things that are happening in the Jewish Community Religious School connected to creation care. That would be great. And we'll have to get you to take yourself off mute again.
As long as I've been living on Zoom, I still forget to unmute. Thank you. We have been doing green education in our Jewish school for our children, I guess forever. There are a number of Jewish values that we teach that relate to care of the earth. And so that's been a part of our curriculum. And prior to this year, a few hands-on things have become our tradition. And they've mostly come from one of our teachers who Joan knows well, Carrie Manneberg. When we celebrate Passover, part of the ritual is to eat horseradish because it's a bitter herb. And so Carrie has planted that in our temple garden. And every year on Tu B'Shvat, which is a holiday we celebrate generally in January, and it's a holiday about being grateful for the trees and taking care of the earth. And it's considered the Jewish New Year of the trees. He always plants parsley and has the kids help him. And then we take that parsley just about the time that it's time for the Passover Seder, where we need parsley. That parsley is big enough to be eaten. So we've always done that. And now that I hear about planting potatoes, I'm thinking, oh, if we could plant them and harvest them at Hanukkah and make latkes in December. I've got to think through the growth cycle of potatoes, but I'm sure we could harvest them and then store them and then eat them. So I'm gonna talk to Carrie. He's getting married this weekend, so he may not want to think about growing potatoes right now. But so that's something that we've been doing. This next year offers new opportunity for us because we are making plans to, after having a year of only virtual contact with our children, we are making plans to safely reopen. And one of the things that we are planning is to do more outdoors. And so at both of our congregations, we have a good bit of property. And so we are planning for lessons to happen outdoors. In the past, Moses has come on our hill and delivered the Torah, and the kids have received the Torah on that hill at the Congregation of Moses. I imagine we may repeat that this year. And at Temple B'nai Israel, we have a trail. And after listening to Randall talk about the young boy at his camp, it made me think we have two young boys who happened this year to be lucky enough to have Carrie as his teacher. And Carrie is planning to teach them outdoors on that trail and have their lessons outdoors, probably even all winter long, because they're kind of tough and they can handle that. And so we also have plans this year. We have the occasion of learning from a very learned educator and rabbi just a month or so ago about family education. And so I'm working on plans for a 10-year plan for holiday education for families that will happen during our religious school hour. And there are many things that in my learning, I learned to include a variety of different categories, like some text study and recipes and values and a variety of different columns that relate to each holiday. And I have added a green column to my spreadsheet. And so we'll be picking 10 different green activities that relate to the values and activities of each of our holidays, so that for 10 years, if by the end of 10 years, which my teacher tells me is how long families have their kids in religious school, considering they probably have at least 2 kids, so that by the end of the year, our families and our children will have done 10 different green activities for each of our holidays. So, and then Joan can probably tell you as much as I, but Temple B'nai Israel has decided to kind of mirror the green activities and values that the school is having in their curriculum, so that there will be temple-wide activities for all ages that correlate. And I'm hoping to negotiate the same commitment from the Congregation of Moses, so that, and that would be a 10-year plan for both congregations if everybody buys in.
Thank you. Thanks to all of you for giving us some insight into some very beautiful traditions and lessons and activities and connections that you are making with the earth. I'm going to ask one question and then open it up to the audience. What I have heard from each of you is the joy, the love, the beauty, the sort of the holiness of connecting to the earth, right? I've heard the power of paying attention. I've heard the possibilities for learning to identify trees and tracks and digging in the soil and growing living things. The other thing that we asked about in the prep questions was climate change, right? Which isn't as beautiful and joyful of a topic, but I wonder if any of you could speak to either the values that your religious education is giving the next generation in terms of combating everything I heard on the radio this morning was in some way connected to what's going on our one planet and the changes that are happening faster and faster. So I just wonder how much, if at all, the idea of mitigating or acting to protect our one planet comes into the religious education that you do. And any of you is welcome to start, and we'll give everybody a space if they want to answer that question.
Joan, I can answer that. We have traditionally in the sixth grade, started discussing this with our students. And this has been a part of our curriculum for a number of years. It's not been very experiential. It's been more, classroom, workbook, talk, and we hope to make it more experiential over this year. But our high school program, for the last 2 years, we've had just a very dynamic teacher who is not afraid to talk about anything that high schoolers might throw at her. And so she has taken all sorts of current issues and encouraged our teenagers to do it's more a project-based kind of independent learning, in that she'll give them an assignment and she'll give them various resources that they can go and research, and then come back and share their opinions and have to defend their opinions. And so she did this with climate change this year. And it's always really awesome for me to see kids, and they did this with the climate change issue, of like go into it really not with a lot of knowledge. And often she will have them say at the beginning, well, this is what I think about this, blah, blah, blah. And then she'll send them away to actually do some study. And then she has them come back and they grow, and their opinions change when they get a little bit of knowledge. And so it was very powerful with climate change, because our teenagers who thought that they were really good citizens and really taking care of the earth, when they really faced these hard questions, they came back saying that they needed to make changes in the way that they live.
So we have at camp, and I know many church camps and many other, religious affiliated camps and whatnot, obviously have things like, we compost, we have a garden, we are converting all of our lighting to LED, that kind of stuff, right? We are looking at how we look at non-consumables, that kind of stuff. I'm particularly interested in a conversation, and in our denomination, we published in 1991 a creation called to care statement, and in it, right at the opening page, they're citing Isaiah 24 verses 5 and 6, and it says, "The earth lies polluted under its inhabitants, for they have transgressed the laws, violated the statutes, and broken the everlasting covenant." And they go so far to say that breaking of the covenant is sin. And so we actually begin to frame that language around what's happening to God's creation, the way that we are inhabiting it and the way that we are living upon it is actually sinful. And that changes the conversation, especially, I think, more in probably the more conservative and evangelical camps that we're in conversation with, because sin is still a word that a lot of people are has some baggage with it. It's not used as much in the church today, and so what we're doing is beginning to reframe that conversation for people about what if climate change, what if the way that we live on the earth and we're not being mindful of it is actually sin. Well, in our Christian language, what has to happen under sin is there has to be an act of repentance. And we just frame that around the sense of repentance is letting go of old patterns and being renewed and transformed into a new behavioral pattern, right? So that's part of how we are framing the climate change and care for creation conversation as an act of something that is actually sinful, and especially according to that passage in Isaiah, but also Paul goes on later on in Romans to talk about creation is groaning for us to actually begin to awaken to how we are living on this planet, on this earth. So for us, it's navigating maybe a theological conversation, but especially amongst those in the church, because we get such pushback from folks in the church that, about climate change specifically. I mean, it's a word that as soon as you say it, people automatically have certain associations. So if we can frame it around the idea of sin and brokenness, and how do we begin to make that shift towards transforming old patterns into new behaviors, repenting, so to speak, is actually what we're doing. So that's one of the ways that I've been navigating that conversation as a camp director, but also in the church.
Any of our other panelists want to weigh in on that? No pressure. We can move on to audience questions too if Okay, well, so this would be a time, we have about 10 minutes left in our hour together, that if you have joined us to learn and to ask questions of our panelists, I would invite you to unmute yourself and introduce yourself with your name and perhaps how you're connected to this work, and then ask a question for folks who are here to share their experience today.
My name is Ruth Mordyke, and I'm pastor of Skyridge Church of the Brethren in Kalamazoo. And so Randall is here because I knew that he would have wise and wonderful things to say. But I guess my question is, I sometimes find that people have a disconnect between the beauty of whatever it is they're digging in the ground, the beauty of what's in front of them. Oh, this forest is nice, this plant is nice, it's great to hear the birds, here's my garden and here's what I'm doing. That there sometimes is a challenge for adults and I suppose for children, maybe less so for young people, but there's a disconnect between what's immediately in front of them that they love and a sense of having to care for the whole creation and what that kind of calls us to. And I guess I'm curious to know how, or maybe I'm wrong and that disconnect doesn't happen, but how do you make a connection, say, between the local and the global, the tree that's in front of you and the trees that are burning in Canada, that kind of using what's in front of people as a lens into what's larger.
Great question. Anybody want to take a try at that? At Ruth's question of. The quietest panel of experts I've ever worked with here. Or something that sparks for you connected to what you do in your religious education role.
My quick response to that, and I'll be a little bit more quiet here, is that it's, Ruth, I think it's the ability to see what's in front of you and to connect it, just like in a forest, right? All the trees are interconnected by the root systems and all that kind of stuff, right? It's all interconnected. And it's not separate from that tree that's in front of you. That tree that's in front of you is rooted and connected to many other trees that are connected to many other trees. And unless you live on an island, all of those trees are tied together. Yes, we live in a different part of the world than in Africa or whatever, but all of those systems are still tied together intricately. So I think there's a sense of yes, having your tree or a place that's important to you, but recognizing that this is one of many that's interconnected. So it's an intersection or interconnectedness, I'm sorry, of all creation.
Ruth, I can speak to this not in related to the earth, but I think what I'm going to share is it applies to this. We had, this is just one example, we had a situation that was very difficult for our teenagers this past year when there were Israelis bombing Palestinian neighborhoods. And it's a difficult issue for all of us, but it was difficult for our teenagers. And our high school teacher happened to have a connection with two people who lived in Israel who could speak from two different points of view, from the Jewish point of view and from the Palestinian point of view, and who had firsthand knowledge about what was happening in that issue. And with the magic of Zoom, we now have a different way to connect. And I think, you know, if you can see what's in front of you and then listen to someone else who is experiencing something different, that's a way to connect. And our kids came away, I don't know that any of them had the answer, because that's a very complex issue, but at least they had an understanding of why there might be different opinions about this very difficult subject, and have compassion for both sides because they had met people. And I also think about my experiences working with Syrian refugees. And even though I didn't know what it felt like to be a refugee, by having experiences face to face with them, I have compassion and some understanding of the experience. And so I think, Ruth, when we think about maybe like the example you said about forest fires and that sort of thing as a result of global warming, maybe we need to get ourselves and our children face to face with people who have experienced that, even though we don't realize that we're experiencing it in Kalamazoo. And Zoom can make those kinds of connections happen.
I think there's also the opportunity, the sort of the drop in the bucket theory of dealing with it, where they see things and they hear things. And so when we're working with children, it's really hard to imagine our place in all of it when you're looking at a large scale forest fire or some horrible thing going on with global warming. And so when we can sort of pull it back to your drop in this bucket matters, because all of us are putting drops in the bucket. So when we take care of things that that can help that not happen, all of us together create change. Even though you might be a 5-year-old who's just planting a tree to add more oxygen into the world, or helping care for the earth, or recycling, or whatever it may be, each drop in that bucket creates change. And so I've been really trying to drill it down to, it's so big and out there for all of, especially the littler kids, or even the teenagers who feel completely helpless, but they are changing the world. And together, I mean, it's just, there's such a movement going on with the young people that wasn't happening, in my generation as much. So I think it's helping them understand their place in the process can create change, I think helps as well.
I think you all are speaking to kind of the reason for the existence of Hope for Creation too, right? Because we do, when we pull together our common purpose, our common urgent desire to care for the planet and to care for creation and to steward the earth. All those drops in the bucket can make a difference. So thank you. Thanks to each of you for those insights. I'm going to give you one final question and invite you to, as you answer it, also insert anything that you think would be helpful for the folks to know as we wrap up. So this will be each person's last opportunity to speak. And the question I'm going to ask is, if you were approached by a congregation that doesn't currently have very much creation care or stewardship in their religious school curriculum, what advice would you give them? What advice would you give to a faith-based group that's trying to incorporate more environmental sustainability into their religious school curriculum? And again, anyone who wants to can go first. And you probably each have about a minute to share that and anything else you'd like to close out with.
Well, thinking about that, I constantly go back to the Bible, Genesis 1, 26. It's let me see. In the King James, it says, "And God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth." And to me, that means we have to take care of the earth. We have to, so that the animals and, have something to live off of, including ourselves. In the NIV version of the Bible, it says, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky and the livestock. So if we go back to the book, it tells us right there that we have to take care of everything here on this earth. So I just refer them to the Bible.
I would say that the first thing to do is what we've already talked about, and of getting people, kids and adults and everybody out into nature and have experiences being outside, being in forests, planting things, all of that. And then also just more education, more learning about climate change and what we're up against, and ways that we can make things better. I did mention that we did a book study on the book The Future We Choose, and the basic premise of that is that we need to change our mindset. We need to change everything about how we think about the earth and caring for it, and be stubbornly optimistic. And when we finished the study, several people said, "Oh, I understand better, and I feel more optimistic about the possibility of what we can do." We want to fight the hopelessness of it's too big a problem and we can't make any difference. We can. Each one of us can. We just need to keep on working on it.
I agree completely with Eileen, and just letting people know that small steps are still steps. Doing something little is still doing something, and it might just mean starting a recycling program, or it might mean not printing your bulletins every week. Now that we've been Zooming for so long, coming back to worship, everyone can pop it up on their phone like they've been doing for a year and a half, and it could make little things could make a really big difference, and they don't have to commit to something enormous right out of the gate, but small steps are steps.
My philosophy is becoming less is more. And I agree with the small steps, but I think starting small, but the second thing I would say is meet people where they are. And when it comes to children, you have to pay attention to their developmental level, and things have to be have to match where they are learning and developing at their age, and they're not little adults, and we have to respect that. But even with adults, to meet people where they are, and everybody's at a different place on this journey. My kids have been recycling their entire life, but there are other people who don't even know what that's like. And so that's kind of a developmental level as well. Oh, and one last thing, it doesn't have to all happen this year. Like I'm working on a 10-year plan, and I think that is doable. And I'm also conscious that, do we even have 10 years? But okay, thank.
Randall, do you have any advice to share?
I'm just gonna build on the foundations that's already been spoken here with the wisdom, and just say that there's a whole movement that's been happening for probably about 5 to 10 years now called the Forest Church movement. So the Forest Church movement, right? Basically, you're in a congregation, just take it outside. Take it outside and begin implementing all of the lessons that creation is speaking right then and there during that worship hour or worship time, however long that is. And let's not close ourselves off from it. Take it outside and be mindful of it. So essentially get outside, have more than experience. And experience is just that we, if we can encounter something, and when we encounter something, it actually speaks to our spirit. The experience kind of involves our senses, but the encounter speaks directly to our soul. So find ways to facilitate encounters with God's creation. And in doing that, your response, it's like bird language. There's a call and a response. Creation calls, we have a response. And when we learn to distinguish what the call is in creation, then we learn how to better respond. But we can't try to respond to something that we're not paying attention to. So that's my sense of things, is that take everything you're doing, and that's what the pandemic did anyway, right? It pushed us outside. This is a virus that's in the air. And one of the best ways to prevent that virus from getting into us is to be outdoors.
Thank you. That's a great way to end on a beautiful Thursday afternoon. Take it outside. Great advice for all of us as we think about religious education, as we think about our own personal health, as we think about our families and our work. So I would just like to take a moment to name and thank the folks who've been speaking today. Nora Chaus, who is the director of the Marvin and Rosalie Okun Kalamazoo Community Jewish School. Randall Westfall, who's the director of Outdoor Ministries at Camp Brethren Heights. Meredith Allspach, who's the director of Youth and Families at First Presbyterian Church and also has a role at Richland Presbyterian Church. Augusta Lipsey from Allen Chapel AME Church here in Kalamazoo, and Eileen Best from Westminster Presbyterian Church in Portage. It has been a delight and a joy to hear your stories and to learn from you all today. And I can say that if folks who are on the call want to get connected with one another, feel free always to reach out through Hope for Creation, and we can help in terms of following up to share curriculum or to give you the opportunity to be further connected after today's event. Our next Green Team event will take place in October 14th, when we're going to talk about green burials and how congregations can connect with and be involved in that way of marking the end of the human life cycle. So with that, I would like to say one special thanks to Eileen Best, who pulled together the panel today and is my partner in crime in the Green Team work for Hope for Creation. And I wish you all a wonderful afternoon, and we look forward to connecting again soon. Take good care, all.